This is the halftime report powered by Sports Cannabis. I'm your host, D-Rey. When you think of cannabis industry leaders and dot connectors, you got to think of Ryan Rapaport. He's been pushing the green on many fronts. So thank you for joining us today with an Infused Talk with him.
Thanks for having me today. My name is Ryan Rapaport. I was a lifelong athlete, got started in martial arts, played college football. My college career got cut short by one season because of head injuries. And so spent the last, several years working in plant medicine, working on like the content and influencer marketing side.
That's dope, bro. That's dope. So we asked everybody, what was your introduction to cannabis? I know you said that the head injuries in college was kind of the start of it, but what was the real introduction to cannabis?
Man, the real introduction to cannabis goes back to when I was 12. Yeah, okay. 12. And so one of my friends from Taekwondo cracked into his parents' stash and were taking a couple hits. And, it's funny, after that, I was actually away from the plant for like quite some time. Because I competed nationally, and I thought that it was really affecting me. I felt change from it. And so I was like, oh, this must be bad. I don't want to affect my performance. And so I got away from it for a really long time, came back to it in high school. And that's, all she wrote since then. It started off as what I thought was recreational. And then over time, it became to understand the plant, it turned into more of a medical. And, I think it covers both sides of the spectrum, but, I'm just a big proponent of plant medicine in general.
All right. So you said something, and I was going to ask it later down the line, but you said something that just perfect segue for it. You said that it was affecting your performance, right? Like you felt like it was messing with you a little bit. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I got to ask flat out, do you think cannabis is a performance enhancer?
Ooh, yeah. See, that's the thing, right? In my opinion, it's not an enhancer. I don't think it makes anyone more tuned in. It's not like someone popping an Adderall pill and they're like, snippity snappity all over the place. It's not like it's a steroid where, you're getting muscle mass or you're healing faster because of it. It's really just an equalizer in a lot of ways. Takes you down a level, or helps inflammation. There's so many things it does that while it might aid performance, I don't think it enhances performance, right? It's not like it's giving you that added edge. If anything, it's taking that edge off, and through like hard work and perseverance that you have to make sure it's not affecting your game.
I see what you're saying. That to me, like I always ask that. To me, the thing with Shikari last year was what kind of like, the light bulb went off. Like, hold on, y'all are saying that at one point it's, oh, this thing dulls people out. They're terrible on it. They're unproductive. It robs people of their ambition. And the next it's, this thing is a performance enhancer and it's helping these athletes. It's like, all right, which one is it? So I always like to ask people what side of the fence they fall on. Their real journey with cannabis starting around the time that they had something go on with a head injury or something that relates to it. Like for me, I had a career-ending injury, but it was a nerve injury. And then it threw a lot of things off up here. Like it was in my leg, but because your nerves aren't firing at a certain point, it threw me off in a way. And I've heard you use the term unlocking your mind with cannabis. So what did you mean by that? And is that centered around the idea that you started around the time of those concussions, or was it just how you always felt about it?
So, cannabis was already a part of my life in a minor way. And I think it really picked up after my freshman year in high school. I think actually after my freshman year in football.
Okay.
And so I was probably already sustaining head injuries then, because I played defensive line, so I was running headfirst in people, and it was actually wrestling in high school where I got my worst concussion, where I got dropped on my head on like a 1-layer mat, and that one sent me loopy for days, and then ended up getting hit in the head a week later, like smacked in the back of the head and passed out, a few hours or sometime not too long after that, and probably hit my head on the floor. They found me like in the school hallway, like face flat on the floor. and spent a week in the hospital after that. And so barely remember anything about that period of time, but there was like a noticeable shift. What I've learned about cannabis is it's not the THC as much as the other cannabinoids that are helping pathways through your brain.
Yeah.
And so I can't say that throughout this time that it's been an inhibitor, it hasn't, stopped anything from happening, but it's actually taken me to a place where I'm more open and understanding of what's going on in my body and in my head and with my mental health.
And what do you think does that? Because for me, I thought it was just, I told somebody, I was like, when I started smoking, obviously I'm using cannabis. I started smoking. I told them it felt like certain doors in my mind started to unlock. It was almost like I had reached a point where I couldn't go any further on my own. And I needed this thing to kind of remove those barriers. So what do you think? I feel like you're more versed in this. What do you think it is that does that?
I'm gonna put science aside. I'm gonna say it's magic. It's like if you think about it, cannabis has been, historically throughout time, it was a medicine for a lot of different ailments, and it was used in ceremonies and all across the world. And so I think there's something innate about the plant that we don't totally understand yet. We like really geek out on the science of like the cannabinoids and terpenes and like all the different chemical reactions that happen and how the plant is just so weird. I mean, like you can do crazy things, even when growing it. You can like split it in half and it'll grow in the middle, So I think there's something else that's going on there that's not necessarily obviously everything that's happening in our heads is chemical, but I think it's a little deeper than that. That there's some tie back there longer than modern society, and that it's something that's been around humans for a long time. For some reason, we've evolved around it. We've evolved our cannabinoid receptors. We know that the plant's been a part of human culture for quite some time. Yeah, I think there's something there that we lost over time.
Damn. I never thought of it like that. I was making a joke one day. I was like, well, I know my dad was smoking when I was conceived, so maybe it was, you know what I mean? Like, but I never thought of it like that, because you're right. I remember I was reading something, they said ancient Chinese cultures had used it. I have Native American in my blood. They were talking about how like it's a huge tool in Native American culture. It is something that we've almost got dumbed down from it. We've kind of lost it. We've in a way become zombified from the part of it, that allows us to tap into other things. I gotta ask you, what's your trippiest experience? What was like the thing? What cannabis? We ain't gonna get into psychedelics. I don't know if you're in that. I'm be honest with you. I am, but this is about sports cannabis, so we're gonna stick to cannabis. But what was your trippiest thing with cannabis?
Oh man, it's a high school one. It's like one of the early ones, and I'll never forget it. Because I just started smoking like regularly.
Yeah.
And we're at a friend's house, and we're all these. My friend's mom was around, but we were all kind of like outside running around being crazy. And I lost all my friends. They went somewhere else, and so I was just sitting there, high as hell, on the porch of his house, hearing things. I don't know, because we lived down in the middle of the woods. We grew up in farm country, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I could hear. It sounded like people were talking in the woods. And I thought they were just like fucking with me, trying to, scare me, or they were like jump out at me. And then at one point I got weirded out enough that I walked inside, and his mom was sitting there like watching TV, and I said something to her, and I saw her just turn and look at me and give me the like deadpan, what? And then I realized I didn't know what the hell I just said. I paused for a second, and I'm like, full on straight, like I looked right at you. I just told you something, and then when you looked at me, like I said the most insane thing you've ever heard in your life, and then I couldn't remember what that was. That's I started realizing the power at that point. Not just the emotional and mental power, but the actual debilitating power of cannabis.
That's crazy. You kind of opened up a new conversation with the spirituality of it. So do you think it assists in that?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, I think we're more intertwined with plants than people want to give us credit for. And the fact that we have used plants for so long, it's only the last 100 years that we've gotten away from plants being the remedy. for distilling the plants and finding particular compounds. I mean,
it's interesting. Do you know why we got away from plants over the past 100 years?
Money. You can't lock down plants. You can lock down compounds.
Yeah. I was about to say, I remember I was reading something during the industrialization period. I'm not sure if it's 100% true, but they were saying that during when they were really trying to push for that and like factories were just popping up left and right, it came down to, all right, what are we going to go with, hemp or wood? And the guys that own wood just had more money. They was like, no, we're going to make this shit. We're going to sew up the plant in every way to where nobody wants to use it. Nobody thinks it's safe. Nobody think it'll be useful. And then you'll have to use paper for everything because they found out that you can make paper out of it. I'm talking about the hemp plant, not just, weed. You know what I mean? I'm talking about like the plant as a whole and everything that it does. Like you see they sell hemp seeds and Whole Foods and shit. But it's always interesting for you to say like it was 100 years ago. It's always interesting to hear somebody's story of how we got to this point. So I got to ask you, where do you think we're heading next with it?
Man, what I hope is around the corner is more understanding.
Mm-hmm.
It's like like I said, we got away from it and we have all the science, but we weren't putting the science towards actually discovering more about the plant. Instead, we were focusing on, okay, what can we do to make it stronger? What can we put more THC in there? And there wasn't a whole lot of scientific process in there. Well, maybe there was at a certain point, but there's a lot of people just doing it in grow houses and in their closets, and so they couldn't really. There wasn't really scientific method around that, and the plant had turned into something else. This like THC powered, mechanism, right? Where it's like, how high can you get?
Pretty much.
But I think what really the change maker is going to be moving forward in good and for bad is for research.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be some companies that are going, okay, we're going to make growing the plant better, cleaner, different cannabinoids, and you're going to have other people be like, okay, let's synthesize that. Let's turn that into like the whole Delta 8 thing, and even CBD. I mean, CBD is just one compound, right?
Yeah.
So everyone wants to say, oh, it's this miracle thing. It's just one part of the plant. There's at least at any given time, another 30 to 80 chemicals in that one little nug.
Yeah.
And, the more they discover more cannabinoids, every couple months, it feels like. I remember like 2 years ago, they're like, yeah, we found 40 more. Like, you didn't know those were in there?
That's crazy. Yeah. It kind of, I'm not going to lie, it worries me. Like, damn, like how much didn't we know? And how much, like how behind are we really with this thing? You know what I mean?
Well, we consider ourselves advanced, but when you start talking about how these plants do what they do to us, and whether it's like cannabis or psilocybin or ayahuasca, blasting off, and you can still. I have a friend who's a disabled combat veteran, and he eats more THC than I ever thought was humanly possible. Him and his wife would cook stuff up, and I would take a bite, and I would be hallucinating all night. Trying to sleep, and I'm like, seeing like aliens, like when I close my eyes, and like being blasted through wormholes, and but he needs that.
Yeah.
So, I think that there's a way that our body interacts, and he's in constant pain too. So people that are in constant pain can handle those higher levels of THC. And I kind of have this theory that the more pain you're in, the more cannabis you're able to consume, because on like a level, because actually that's what your body needs.
Nah, you're absolutely right. It's I used to give people the toughest time about depending on like Tylenol and things like that. Like my whole thing was just like drink water and you know what I mean, just go out and exercise. And it wasn't until my injury that number one, I was humbled to call it what it is. But number two, like you said, I have realized like not only do I need this, but I need a strong dosage of it. Like I'm a medical patient because I was like, I didn't realize that it was so many different levels to it. And they're smoking for smoking's sake, then they're smoking to deal with pain. And that's important. I feel like people need to, like you said, the future of it needs to be more research, but people need to understand it. Because I hope that we come up on a time where it's like liquor almost. You know what I mean? Like you go in a liquor store, people know like that's the gin, that's the wine, that's whiskey, you know what I mean? And all of them have these different things. And I like to think we're coming up on a time where people are looking at cannabis in a similar light. But quite frankly, it's just something that's better for you. it's not poison. You know what I mean?
You know, you think prohibition for liquor ended, you know, over 100 years ago. Well, actually, probably almost right about 100 years ago now.
Yeah.
So we've had all that time to figure that shit out. But, you know, cannabis, it's not even, you know, we're not even at that level yet. There's still prohibition. There's still liquor prohibition. So, you know, once, you know, the research is happening at least, and we got, you know, other states, you know, like 30 some odd states now that are on board. So I think we're making our way there.
We are. No, we definitely are. Speaking of prohibitions and where they don't have jurisdiction, this halftime is one of them. So if you're okay with it, I'm going to take a hit real quick. And if you got yours, you can get busy. I got a bong today with me, my little mini bong and shit. This is very piney. Because you know that shit is coming. You're going to have like the high class weed people who are like, what you got there? I got a hybrid with me today. What you got over there?
I got a Candid. You know, this is all organic. It's grown in my parents' backyard. You know, so it's like it's one of those things where I know the source, and that's kind of a rare thing in cannabis these days, right? It's like where that flower come from? Who grew that shit? You know, that's not. You don't get that. You don't. To your point, you're talking about like, you know, who made that bottle of wine, because that you know $1,200 bottle of wine has the signature from the winemaker on it, right?
And yeah, I'm really a big fan of the hybrids, especially towards the nighttime, because it's just I've noticed that obviously like people go towards indicas for like better sleep, but there is something about people give sativas a bad name for ramping up their thoughts. But if you meditate and you do the work outside of it, at least what I found, if you meditate and you do the work outside of it, you read, you find ways to discipline your mind. It's kind of a treat of having a hybrid at night, because number one, you kind of like organize your thoughts throughout the day, and you kind of your mind is going enough to go through your day and figure out what you could have did better, what went well, blah, blah, blah. You can recap your day, but now your body's also like relaxed. So I'm a big fan of the hybrids at night.
Well, you're you know, going back to like classification, right, and like totally understanding what the plant is. And it's like being able to one day I hope that we'll be able to say like, hell, here's that compound, and that compound does this.
You spoke on it earlier, with really understanding using cannabis before you work out. What the fuck is zone training?
Man, that's the only way I work out. You know, it's I think the getting into a flow state is something that a lot of people struggle with. People find different ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, cannabis has always been a way that I can easily get into that flow state where my mind isn't focused on the strenuous nature. Not that I even like go somewhere else, but that I'm able to tune into that very moment and be in that moment. And it's very much for me like a form of meditation. And it's funny because when you use that while you're training to, you know, when you're doing something more strenuous, even if it's not like sweating strenuous, it's like a stretch, right? And that you really feel that stretch, and it hurts to feel that stretch, but you still have to feel it. And I do it with the timer. And so like there's a mental part of working out and competing that I think cannabis either, you know, for some people might close down some pathways, but for other people, it allows them to get into that flow state and tune into parts of their body that, you know, we're not normally listening to.
What do you think is the good, the bad, and the ugly of the day the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, the MLB, the MLS all say, fuck it, give them weed?
Man, I hope that's sooner than later. I think if anyone's closest to it's the NHL, funny enough, because all those guys, you know, they're pain pills and smash faces and punch each other in the face like a full-on combat sport.
Yeah.
So if you think about it that way, then
it's like MMA on ice.
It needs some weed. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like it's MMA on ice. I think it's funny because instead of giving someone like I was just reading Evan Britton's book, and he's talking about the Percocet regimen they put him on. Like, you're hurt, here's your 90 pills that you take every 3 weeks. and imagine if there was like, here's your 9 joints you smoke over the course of a month.
Yeah.
you know, and it's just in the end, it goes back to, I think there's science and kind of conventional healthcare has said one thing.
Yeah.
And we know now that that was not in our best interest. So everyone's kind of peeling back, looking for new answers. And, you have the military testing psychedelics. UFC recently has come around a lot more towards cannabis as well. So I think that there's change happening, but we're looking at it microcosmally. Like we're seeing it happening all within a couple of years, whereas, it could be a 20, 30-year process to get to where we want to be.
So I got to ask a question. And you just said the word, psychedelics. Cannabis's run is almost being like, its thunder is being stolen by like psychedelics now, because cities like Denver, certain parts of California, I think Austin just had to. A lot of places are starting to at least look into the effects and / benefits of psychedelics. So I have to ask you straight up, what do you think those effects / benefits are? And where do you stand on it?
Well, first I'll say there's a lot of stigma around that because it's not legal, and it's, even the medical research is going, despite everything it's shown, you can't walk into a store and buy a mushroom and start chopping down on it. So
that is a
because
dangerous
of that,
world.
What's that?
It is a dangerous world.
So where do I stand on it? I am a user. I use small doses of psilocybin, and I get, as someone who's had massive head trauma, I've come out of the darkest place in my life thanks to that. And I believe that it's a conversation that needs to be normalized. It's a really hard one to have because it seems so unprofessional. But if you know people that have dealt with trauma, head injuries, even depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's, all of these afflictions are from damage that's happening in your brain. And there's studies coming out at Yale, Johns Hopkins, all these prestigious medical universities that are finding, this is a life-changing thing. From the first time you consume it to taking the smallest non-psychoactive doses, that there are ways that this is regrowing brain cells, essentially. It's reconnecting your brain at the cellular neuron level, and there's nothing else that does that. Nothing else that does that. And it's something that's been around us, and we, for as long as human beings have been around, we're pretty sure that mushrooms have been, growing around as another type of, indigenous plant medicine. So where I stand on it is, I talk about it. I think it's an important thing to talk about. I think it's uncomfortable for some people to talk about it, but when you have a transparent conversation, it kind of really felt similar to when I joined the cannabis industry and started normalizing that conversation around people who were more, conservative in their views around that type of thing. But now, here we are 5-6 years after that, and I'm, not trying to normalize another conversation, but it's a conversation that's, essentially saved my life in a lot of ways.
I love you for being honest. I think if cannabis is the next step and the physical next evolution in humans, I guess is like the most dramatic way I could say it. Psychedelics is the spiritual. Both of them have a spiritual component, but psychedelics is the spiritual, but more commonly felt emotional healing, because I don't think that a lot of people understand that like your emotions are very much tied to the rest of it. I wrote it in my book that you have it's like 4 elements, just like the 4 elements of the earth. I feel like as human beings, that's what we're made up of. That we're made up of. I described it in the book as fire being our intellect, water being our emotions / spirit, earth being our bodies, and air being our souls. And if one of those is out of whack or out of balance, you kind of get thrown off, just like an element around here. If it's too fucking dry, you know what I mean? If it's too much just earth, or if it's too much wind, or if it's too much of anything is a bad thing. And something being completely missing is also bad. So I think the psychedelics, don't get me wrong, I feel like they cannot, like you said, you can't just walk into a store and start grabbing them shits. So sorry about that. But I was like, I do not want to see a world where everybody just has access to it because it opens doors. It opens doors. It
In
opens doors.
Amsterdam, they have smart shops, so
Yeah.
you can walk off the street in Amsterdam and buy like ounces of wet mushrooms.
Yeah, but they're a little more disciplined than us. Ain't no little more, they are.
Well,
They are.
I mean, you know how those tourists get, how some of those tourists get there.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I mean, where I think it comes down to is an education thing, though. You know, you can you can go buy a handle of $6.99 vodka and get to work. You know, and just because it's there doesn't mean everyone goes and does it. People know, well, you know, some people learn the hard way, and the same thing. You know, if someone eats, some of us have learned the hard ways from doing those store shopping things there, but it's the same thing around cannabis and CBD and turmeric, right? It all comes back to education, and a lot of the time that education's missing. And so now we're relearning about all these different plant medicines, and you know, like we were saying, all these different studies that are happening around cannabis, around psilocybin, around you know DMT, and all those type of things. We know that is what's going to be educating us moving forward, and hopefully we can have platforms like this, right, where we can talk about and educate a wider audience. If it's just, you know, one person that learns something today and takes it away, then we did a service to the world, in my opinion.
The other thing that's been in the corner fast shit is crypto. And cannabis has already made its way. Sorry, not just crypto, the metaverse, Web3, all that good shit. And cannabis has already made its way into it because there are already virtual weed stores where you can buy from and get weed delivered in real life. Now, obviously, you got to be in some of the more cooler places in the country. Like, what the fuck? Like, all of them are all coming together. So, what do you think is next, man? They talking about Snoop having this he has the damn sandbox thing. You see NFTs on open seas having to deal with weed, but I'm not a rapper. So what do you think? so what do you think is next with all this shit coming together, man? What's your final thoughts on this?
Well, you know, I think there's what you're talking about is blockchain, right? It's just like decentralization of communication. And so, if you in terms of cannabis, I think it's interesting for tracking. And imagine that you're a farmer in Africa. You have your cannabis strains. This is like the strains that your people have been growing for thousands of years, probably in the same place and around the same area.
We're talking all kind of weed.
But people, you know, the people have been going to Africa for years and taking the seeds and taking them back and, you know, spinning them up as, oh, here's my, you know, pink slippers and lady hat. And you know nothing about the plant, where it came from. There's no provenance, going back to that word, right? That's the thing with NFTs, right? We know if I buy this piece of virtual real estate or I buy this piece of art, we can, with blockchain, track it back to its source. So I would like to see that for something like cannabis genetics, right? Where you know they're finding that in Colombia there's a certain strain, and you know people are taking the seeds, but you don't know where that really came from. So what if there's a way to genetically tag and trace? And I've actually heard some people working on this type of thing. And so that is where it's interesting to me to see where it's going to go. How do you start tracking things with blockchain?
That is amazing. That is a great answer. I was like, where's he going with this? But I see what you're saying. Like it's a different level of intimacy. Like we talked about with the vineyards, the idea of knowing this farm in this part of the country or this part of the world, this happens there, that happens there. You could visit it. Maybe that does that with cannabis. So thank you for that. Final thoughts. What's on your mind? Final thought. Anything you want to plug?
I mean, it's funny. I didn't think if you'd asked me that before today, I would I'd say this, but I think we also need to look into not just the cannabis and the psilocybin of the world, but go back to other plants. So I mean, like talk about turmeric. I haven't been taking turmeric, and I know how good it is for me. Anytime I ever take it, like I've had 3 knee surgeries on my left knee, 3 mastectomies, same spot. You know, I'm already arthritic. I'm 36. as I said that, my knee clicked. And, so like, I know that helps me, but I don't really understand it. So, I think everyone should be looking at those type of plants. There's a lot of great resources out there. One of my favorites is a Medicine Hunter.
Okay.
By the name of Chris Killam. He travels all around the world and goes to these different shamans and tribes around the world and learns about their plant medicine and takes it back to the U.S. and to global markets and helps them set up sustainable logistics and operations around that type of plant, around those plants. So I think my big walkway is, let's just like do a little more research, become a little more educated and just try to find those plants that are helping us when maybe I haven't had an Advil in 5 years. And even though my knee's been bothering me a little bit lately, I don't want to dull the pain. I'm not like, I don't want to stop it. I want to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where the plants come in.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Halftime Report, powered by Sports Cannabis. I'm your host, D-Ray. Make sure y'all follow us on IG, Twitter, YouTube for more infused Candid talks, man. Y'all be well. Thanks.